I haven't loved you for all these 50 years. It was just convenient for me to be with you, Robert told his wife Cassandra at their golden wedding anniversary. The guests froze, stunned by his words. Cassandra, 72, looked young and elegant, with light blue eyes and carefully styled grey hair. She was intently watching her reflection in the mirror. The molten milk-coloured dress she was trying on at the studio fit her perfectly, highlighting her still intact poise. "Mom, you're just beautiful," Chloe said with admiration, looking at her mother. Dolores, an older woman with kind eyes, stepped back to evaluate the finished work. "Now it's perfect," she said, placing the final pin. "This dress seems made for you." Their daughter had convinced Cassandra and Robert to celebrate their golden anniversary in style. "It's a once-in-a-lifetime milestone," she insisted, and there was no way to refuse. As the planner, Chloe took control with determination, booking a restaurant, inviting family, and handling the decorations. Cassandra ran her palm over the soft fabric of the dress and thought, has it really been 50 years? She remembered how just yesterday Robert was bringing her wildflowers from the fields, and now his hair was completely grey. But she knew every one of his grey hairs by heart. They were a part of her. After the fitting, mother and daughter walked into a cosy cafe nearby. The air was filled with the aroma of freshly brewed coffee and cinnamon buns. "Well, Mum, do you like the dress?" Chloe asked, stirring her cappuccino. "It's a good dress, honey, a very good dress." Cassandra looked at her daughter with gratitude. Chloe began listing her plans for the party, the formal dinner at the restaurant, the orchestra Lucas had found, and the menu that promised to be exceptional. "Who from the family is coming?" Cassandra asked, breaking off a piece of cake. Chloe hesitated for a moment. "Uncle Quentin and Tiffany said yes, Betty and her husband." She paused and then added, almost in passing, "and Aunt Sara is coming too." Cassandra froze. The name of her sister, spoken aloud, was like an unexpected gust of cold wind. Her fingers tightened around her cup. Noticing her mother's tension, Chloe quickly changed the subject. "Mum, you know my niece, Viola, is dating a guy. He's a good boy, serious, already in grad school." A gentle smile appeared on Cassandra's face. Her granddaughters were a breath of fresh air in her life, a source of pride and endless love. "And Elsa isn't far behind her sister," she added. The conversation returned to its usual course, the granddaughters' studies, their plans, dreams, and aspirations. That evening, when she got home, Cassandra went straight to the kitchen. For 40 years, the small kitchen in their apartment wasn't just a place to cook, but the heart of their home. The colourful curtains with embroidered roosters, which Cassandra had sewn by hand on long winter evenings, the earthenware pots lovingly arranged on the shelves, and the scent of fresh pastries and soups. All of it created a feeling of warmth and comfort. Cassandra took the meat grinder out of the cabinet, determined to make Robert's favourite meatloaf. Her hands worked automatically while her thoughts swirled around the upcoming meeting with her sister. They hadn't seen each other in at least 10 years. The front door slammed shut. It was Robert, returning from his walk. Despite being retired, he still worked as a consultant at a factory. The habit of being active was still a part of him. A spark of interest in life still shone in his eyes, and this made Cassandra happy. "How was the dress fitting?" he asked, kissing his wife's cheek and taking off his coat. "Good, the dress is almost ready. And you, Robert, do you need a new suit?" Cassandra asked pointedly during dinner, serving the delicious meatloaf with mashed potatoes. "Cassandra, why would I need a fifth suit? I have 2 collecting dust in the closet, one I haven't even worn," he grumbled, digging into his food with a hearty appetite. 50 years together is no joke. You can't show up in a suit like that, not for an anniversary like this, she insisted. After much persuasion, Cassandra got her way. Chloe organised a suit fitting at their home with an online store. It was her gift to her parents. The next day, when the delivery guy brought several styles, Robert began trying them on in front of the living room mirror with a look of disdain. He finally settled on a dark blue suit with a subtle sheen. Cassandra couldn't take her eyes off her husband. "Robert, you look so handsome in that suit," she said with tenderness. She truly admired him, even though the years had left their mark on his once slender figure, despite everything that had happened between them and the pain he had once caused her. "Oh, Cassandra, stop it," Robert said, blushing and quickly taking off the jacket. "I'm just going to wear that old suit Lucas left after his graduation. I'm going in that, and that's final." With determination, Cassandra put the new suit back in its garment bag. "This suit it is," she said firmly. That evening, after dinner and the dishes were done, Cassandra worked up the courage to speak. "Robert, Chloe said Sara is coming to our golden anniversary." The silence that followed seemed to fill the entire room. Robert didn't say anything. He stood motionless, as if he had suddenly aged 10 years, and then, as if he hadn't heard anything, he quietly left the room. Left alone, Cassandra sat in a chair and lost herself in memories of how it all began. She was in 9th grade and he was in 10th, having just moved to their town with his parents. Tall, with curly brown hair and brown eyes, he immediately won the hearts of all the girls at school. Their love for volleyball brought them together. Cassandra was the captain of the girls' team, and Robert played on the boys' team. They were always arguing about technique, strategy, and which team was stronger. They even had a silly fight over a ball once that made her cry, and then, unexpectedly for everyone, they started dating. The school quickly began to whisper, "Massa, boyfriend and girlfriend." The youthful memories brought a sad smile to Cassandra's face. So much time had passed. Back then, it seemed that life would be pure, light, and cloudless happiness, but it turned out to be very different. Her thoughts were interrupted by the doorbell. She rushed to open it and was immediately met by the embrace of her twin granddaughters. "Grandma, we're staying the night," the girls shouted from the doorway, entering the house with their backpacks. Viola and Elsa were true beauties, tall, blonde, with large grey eyes. One was the exact copy of Chloe, the other looked more like her father. Their arrival instantly filled the apartment with life and noise. While Robert chatted with his granddaughters in the living room, a little more energized by their presence, Cassandra was in the kitchen preparing their favorite pancakes with cottage cheese. "Grandma, is it true you bought a wedding dress? Show us," the granddaughters insisted when the aroma of pancakes spread through the apartment. "First we eat, then we look at the dresses," Cassandra smiled, skillfully flipping another pancake. During dinner, the twins shared their news and secrets at the same time. Viola talked about her relationship with a young grad student who seemed to be serious about her. "Just imagine, Grandma, I've even met his parents," she chirped, devouring her third pancake. Elsa, not wanting to be in her sister's shadow, spoke with enthusiasm about her upcoming exchange trip to Italy. "I've always dreamed of seeing the Cathedral of San, the Colosseum. I've even started learning Italian." Cassandra watched her granddaughters with a quiet joy and a pang of melancholy for the quick passage of time. Not long ago, she was singing them lullabies. And now they were building their own lives, falling in love, dreaming. "Girls, everything has its time," she said, pouring more tea. "To love, to marry, and to have children. The most important thing is that your soul doesn't ache from not having time for something important." Her gaze misted over for a moment, as if her entire life was passing before her eyes, with its joys and sorrows, with decisions that could not be changed. The tea cooled in the cup as Cassandra sat by the window, watching the autumn leaves fall. The upcoming anniversary and the news of her sister's arrival awakened memories that she had tried for years to keep in a far corner of her mind. Her childhood with Sara was spent in a small mining town. Their father, Dylan, a respected miner in town, went down into the mine every day. Their mother, Amelia, was a seamstress at the only local shop, where she clothed half the town. They lived modestly, but they had everything they needed. Cassandra remembered their small house with a little garden where her mother grew marigolds. The kitchen always smelled of freshly baked bread. On Sundays, the whole family gathered around the table, drank tea and listened to programs on the radio. The sisters had very different personalities, like day and night. From childhood, Cassandra was quiet and sensible. She got good grades, helped with household chores, and read non-stop. By the age of 10, she had already read the entire family library. Sara, on the other hand, was mischievous and restless, always with scraped knees, torn dresses, and a spark of uncontrollable energy in her eyes. She got into one scrape after another, but thanks to her charm and determination, she always got out of them. "But the youngest one has a fiery personality," the neighbours would say to their mother. She would only sigh in response. Since childhood, there had been a strange rivalry between the sisters. When Cassandra got a new dress for school, Sara would throw a tantrum, demanding one just like it or better. But once she got it, she would soon lose interest, and the dress would end up forgotten in the closet. The parents tried to love both daughters equally, but Sara always felt they loved Cassandra more. "Cassandra is a model student. Cassandra is a good helper. And what am I? The redhead," she often complained, slamming her bedroom door. Cassandra remembered that her mother once told her, while braiding her hair before graduation, "Honey, be a little softer with your sister. She has that personality. She always wants to be first, and you should give in sometimes. She needs it more." In their youth, their relationship became more complicated. The 16-year-old Cassandra was already dating Robert, a handsome boy from the parallel class. One day, she came home early from the library and found him and Sara alone in the living room. They had notebooks and books open in front of them. Robert was explaining something, and Sara was looking at him with those eyes. Cassandra understood everything immediately. "Sara isn't looking at me with interest, she just always wants what you have," Robert explained later. And Cassandra wanted to believe him. She wanted to believe him. When Cassandra finished school, she went to enroll in a teacher's college in the state capital, not even thinking that anything could happen between Robert and Sara. Before she left, she and Robert walked until dawn, making plans, talking about their future. He swore eternal love and promised to visit every week. For the first few months, he really did come. They went to the movies, to the park, and kissed on the bench by the fountain. Cassandra was happy. Then his visits became less frequent. Robert claimed he had studies and a part-time job at a mechanic's shop. Cassandra also came home on weekends and holidays. She saw him. He saw him, but she felt that something had changed. His gaze no longer sought her eyes with the same passion. His caresses felt like an obligation. And then came that Sunday that changed her entire life. Cassandra came back from college a day early. Classes were cancelled due to a heating problem in the building. When she got off the bus, she saw Robert and Sara. They were walking down the main street, holding hands and laughing. In Sara's eyes shone that same fire Cassandra knew well, the thrill of possessing what belonged to someone else. And in Robert's eyes, there was a look of true love. Standing by the window, watching the autumn leaves fall, Cassandra relived the pain of that day. "My God, so much time has passed, but it feels like it was yesterday," she thought. She didn't make a scene. She simply called Robert that night and asked him to come over. They sat on the bench in her yard, where they had once kissed until they were dizzy. "Do you love her?" was all Cassandra asked. Robert was silent for a long time, looking at his hands. Then he nodded softly. It was the worst betrayal of her life, from the two people she was closest to. She returned to college and soon fell ill, a nervous breakdown. The world lost its colours and food lost its taste. She was hospitalised. Her mother arrived in silence, packed her things, and took her daughter home to recover. Meanwhile, the situation took a new turn. Sara became pregnant with Robert. In those years, that was a real shame for a single girl, especially for a miner's daughter in a small town where everyone knew everyone. Robert's parents were furious when they found out. His father, Gregory, was a chief engineer at the factory, and his mother taught at the music school. Respected people in the community, they couldn't allow such a scandal. "We don't want that daughter-in-law," his father shouted, pounding his fist on the table. "She has shamed herself and she will shame us. You will marry Cassandra, as planned." They literally forced their son to go back to his former fiancée, threatening to cut off his support if he disobeyed. Robert, raised in a wealthy family, was not prepared to be left without a roof or means of living, and Sara, left alone with her problem, went to her mother. But Amelia was unyielding. "You made your bed, now lie in it. And what have you done? You've stolen your sister's happiness." The matter ended with Sara deciding to have an abortion. Cassandra found out much later. After the procedure, her sister had complications, and the doctors said she would not be able to have any more children. As soon as she finished school, Sara left town, as if running from the past. She enrolled in medical school. She wrote home little. Cassandra, having recovered from her unexpected illness, and to everyone's surprise, and to her own, accepted Robert's marriage proposal. Although she knew he loved her sister, she naively believed she could win back his love. That time would heal his heart. Or maybe she was driven by a feeling of revenge toward her sister, toward herself, toward life, to live with the man who was once loved by Sara. The wedding was simple. They went to the courthouse in a friend's old Ford. Only the closest relatives gathered at a small cafe. Sara didn't come. She said she had a new job and couldn't get away. At least that's what she explained in a brief congratulatory letter. Cassandra remembered how she cried non-stop the night before the wedding. "Why do I want a husband who loves someone else?" she asked the ceiling, but found no answer. And in the morning she wiped away her tears, put on the white dress her mother had sewn, and went to the courthouse with a smile, as if she were completely happy. The first years of marriage were difficult. Robert was attentive but cold. He was distant, as if he were serving a punishment. Cassandra tried to be the perfect wife, cooking his favorite dishes, ironing his shirts with special care, and sewing on his buttons. In bed, she was tender and passionate, although it seemed that Robert was simply fulfilling his marital duty. Everything changed when Lucas was born. Robert literally blossomed. He became a loving father and then an attentive husband. He worked hard to support the family. And when Chloe arrived 4 years later, their lives were filled with a new meaning. Something like true happiness settled in the house. The years passed as they always do. The children grew up and delighted them with their achievements. Robert advanced in his career at the factory from a simple engineer to a workshop manager. Cassandra combined her work at the school with raising the children, creating a cozy home in their small but beloved apartment. Sara wrote letters from time to time, sending postcards on holidays. There were no warm words in them, only dry reports of where she was working and how she was settled. Sometimes she would ask how her niece and nephew were doing. Once, when the children were already teenagers, Sara came to visit unexpectedly. It was a painful week for Cassandra. She noticed how Robert and Sara looked at each other. Those looks were greedy, hungry, full of nostalgia and regret. Outwardly, everything seemed fine. Sara played the role of a loving aunt, and Robert played the cordial host. But Cassandra felt an invisible thread between them that neither time nor distance could break. After that visit, Sara did not return for a long time. They only communicated by phone, exchanging dry, formal news. Many years later, Sara moved. She was offered a job at a hotel with housing. She settled there, occasionally sending postcards with views of the sea. Cassandra never reproached her husband about the past. She didn't make jealous scenes or accuse him of betrayal. Although sometimes when he looked off into the distance, she knew that he was thinking of Sara. It hurt a lot, but she learned to live with that pain, like an old scar that hurts before bad weather. The years lived did not erase the bitterness, but they taught her to value what she had: her children, grandchildren, the home she had created with Robert. Maybe she was never the one person he dreamed of, but she was by his side through sorrow and joy, in sickness and in health. And this, Cassandra thought, watching the autumn leaves fall, was also a lot. The day of their golden anniversary turned out to be surprisingly sunny, as if October wanted to give a gift to the honorees. At the restaurant around 4 p.m., the closest people gathered, about 30 in total. Robert's old colleagues from the factory, the teachers Cassandra had worked with for decades, the neighbours from their apartment building with whom they had shared a lifetime, and of course their children and grandchildren, the centre of their small universe. The restaurant was decorated with a cosy autumnal atmosphere, with clusters of berries, golden maple leaves, and white chrysanthemums. The table was overflowing with delicious food, just as it should be for an anniversary of this magnitude. Cassandra, in her molten milk-coloured dress, not only looked good, she shone with an inner beauty that only comes with age. Light makeup highlighted the clarity of her blue eyes, and a neat hairstyle with pearl hairpins gave her a solemn air. Robert, in his new dark blue suit, stood tall as if he were that young workshop manager she remembered in his best years. The guests didn't spare any compliments. "What a beautiful couple! How well they've aged! What wonderful children and grandchildren!" The host, a young man with a velvety voice and lively eyes, skillfully conducted the program. Cassandra, sitting at the head of the table next to her husband, looked at the guests and thought about the passage of time. It seemed that just yesterday they were celebrating their silver anniversary when the children were still teenagers. And today it was their golden anniversary, and the twin granddaughters were almost as old as Chloe and Lucas were back then. The party continued, toasts were made, the guests participated in contests. On a small stage, local Philharmonic artists performed. Chloe had worked hard, taking care of every detail. Lucas, without holding back, had paid for the best musicians in the city. The string quartet filled the hall with melodies from Cassandra and Robert's youth, and suddenly, in the middle of the party, the door opened and Sara entered. Despite being 70, she was still a striking woman. Her bright turquoise dress highlighted the tan she had acquired under the southern sun. Skillfully applied makeup hid her wrinkles. Her large silver jewelry caught everyone's attention. "Sorry I'm late. The flight was delayed," she said as she entered it, looking around the room. After greeting everyone with a general wave, Sara went directly to the honorees. Cassandra felt her husband tense up next to her. His shoulders became rigid, and his face took on that closed expression he showed in moments of strong inner turmoil. "My dear newlyweds, I congratulate you on this important date," Sara said, kissing her sister first and then Robert on the cheek. A scent of expensive perfume emanated from Sara. "She probably doesn't buy those in her town. She always liked to stand out," Cassandra thought. The night went on. Sara sat at the table, talked to her niece and nephew, and looked with astonishment at her grown-up twin granddaughters. The noise, the music, the laughter all blended into a hum that pushed away her troubling thoughts. It was time for the traditional dance of the honorees, the same Mendelssohn's waltz they had once danced at their own wedding in a small community hall began to play. Cassandra and Robert went to the centre of the hall and twirled in a slow dance. "I haven't loved you for all these 50 years, Robert suddenly whispered in her ear. Cassandra froze, but continued to move mechanically to the rhythm of the music. "What are you saying?" she whispered. "Why are you so angry?" he asked naturally. "I've been with you most of the time." Those words hit her like cold water in winter, not letting her breathe. For him, it's normal, she thought. In my entire life, I never really got to know what kind of man he is. I thought I knew everything about him, like the back of my hand. But look at him now. She silently looked at her husband, to whom she had given half her life. Scenes from the years they had lived passed before her eyes. How she washed his shirts in freezing water when the washing machine broke. How she watched over the children at night so he could sleep before an important meeting. How she gave up her own plans and desires just to make his life easier. She had spent the best years of her life on him. She realized it with terrifying clarity. They danced until the end of the song. The guests applauded. One of Robert's old colleagues shouted, "Kiss them!" Others followed, and soon the entire hall was chanting that word, demanding the traditional kiss from the honorees. Cassandra and Robert had to kiss. At that moment, something broke in the woman's soul, as if a string that had been tightening for years had finally snapped. She understood that she could no longer remain silent. The host gave the floor to the honorees. Robert took the microphone and gave a routine speech, something about happy years and the good children they had raised. He was brief, as always. Then Cassandra took the microphone. She began calmly, almost detachedly, telling the story of their meeting, how she introduced Robert to Sara, how she went away to study, and how she found out about their romance. Her voice sounded firm. It only trembled at the particularly painful moments. "All this time, I knew that Robert loved you, Sara," Cassandra said, looking directly at her sister. The guests looked at each other in astonishment. Chloe and Lucas seemed shocked. They had never heard that story. Their parents had always seemed like an example of a restrained and quiet love. "I'm not going to tell all the details now," Cassandra continued, "but the three of us know the truth. Robert, I thank you for all these years, for our children, for your respect and care. You gave me the opportunity to realize myself as a mother and a woman, but I always knew you loved my sister." A deathly silence reigned in the room. You could hear a pin drop. Sara looked at the floor, nervously fiddling with a napkin. Robert looked as if he had been punched in the stomach, confused, his face pale with red blotches starting to appear. "I lived my life with the man I loved," Cassandra continued, and her voice grew stronger. "And even if that love wasn't completely reciprocated, I thank fate for all the good that was in our family." She spoke for a long time about how important family is, the value of children and grandchildren, and how difficult it is sometimes to maintain a relationship. She didn't blame or reproach, she only stated the facts like someone who made her choice with her eyes wide open and accepted the consequences. With each word, her shoulders straightened as if the weight she had carried for all those years began to lift. It was not so much an externalized resentment as it was a release. Like when admitting a long-hidden illness brings not condemnation but relief and the possibility of healing. After her speech, an awkward pause filled the room. No one knew how to react. The host, professionally handling the confusion, put on some music. The guests began to get up and dance, but in their conversations and glances, you could feel the shock from what they had heard. Cassandra went outside to get some fresh air. Near the restaurant, there was a small square with benches. She sat on one of them, watching the leaves fall. The air was cool, with a faint smell of dry leaves and approaching rain. Chloe came out after her. The daughter sat down next to her and took her mother's hand. Her eyes were full of tears. "Mum, is it true, all this time, Dad loved Aunt Sara?" Chloe asked in a trembling voice. Cassandra nodded. There was no point in denying the obvious. "But that doesn't mean he didn't love you and Lucas, or that he didn't care for me," she said in a low voice. "First love is just special." "And you," Chloe's voice was filled with pain for her mother. "Did you love him all this time, knowing he loved someone else?" "Yes, I loved him, and I love him, and I will continue to love him, even if tomorrow he were to leave me for Sara," Cassandra answered simply. "I was born this way. I'm a one-love woman." Chloe hugged her mother. Her shoulders trembled with suppressed sobs. "I don't know if I could live so many years with someone who loves another." Cassandra stroked her daughter's head as she had when she was a child and came home with scraped knees. "And you don't have to, my daughter. Everyone has their own destiny. Some get honey, others get tar. I chose my destiny and I don't regret it." They sat on the bench, mother and daughter, watching the leaves fall. In the distance, they could hear music from the restaurant. Life continued, despite the secrets revealed and the broken illusions. There was wisdom in that too, in the ability to move forward, no matter what. The night ended near midnight. The relatives dispersed to their homes. Chloe approached her aunt. "Aunt Sara, are you coming to our house? We have plenty of space, and we can talk about life. The girls will be happy." Sara nodded, and they left together. Cassandra and Robert returned home in silence. In the taxi, no one spoke a word. The silence seemed to stretch between them like an old, cracked thread. thin but still intact. At home, Robert was the first to break the silence. Cassandra, thank you for all these years, for a home full of love and care, for our children, for your patience. You shouldn't have told me, she replied. It hurts. I know, forgive me. I knew a long time ago, I always knew. She looked at him with a weary calm. Do you still love Sara? Robert looked away. I don't know, it was so long ago, really. I believe you, she said, hugging him, and then silently went upstairs to the bedroom. Meanwhile, in Chloe's apartment, Sara, sipping wine, told her niece her version of events. If you only knew, Chloe, what kind of love it was. It was enough to lose your mind, to tremble, to stop your heart. Her eyes shone, either from the wine or from tears. Robert and I seemed made for each other, but what stopped you from being together? His parents wanted another woman for their son, a calm and reliable Cassandra, not an impulsive Sara. And Cassandra, she was always like that, so perfect. Everything came easy to her, studies, guys, life. And you started dating her boyfriend. Yes, it was a low move, but I couldn't help it. Love completely enveloped me, and then I got pregnant. Chloe gasped. And what happened to the baby? I had an abortion, Sara whispered, and her voice trembled. Your grandma, my mother, said that baby would only complicate everyone's lives, that Cassandra and Robert would get married soon. And then Sara began to cry, real bitter tears, as if it had all happened yesterday. I knew I could never have children. It was my punishment. Chloe hugged her aunt. Suddenly she understood a lot. Why Sara never married, why she lived so far away from everyone, why there was always a deep sadness in her eyes. Robert chose your mum, Sara continued, wiping away her tears. Maybe because of his parents, maybe out of a sense of duty, I don't know, but it was hard for me to accept. I compared all men to him, and they all lost. Chloe stared at her aunt's face. It was extraordinarily pale, with sharp features, her eyes tired and dim. Aunt Sara, she asked with growing concern, you didn't just come for the golden anniversary, did you? Sara sighed and whispered almost inaudibly, I have cancer, Chloe. Stage 3. They've already started chemo, but the doctors can't give any guarantees. I thought maybe we wouldn't see each other again. I had to clear everything up. That news hit Chloe harder than the story with her father, as if the ground had disappeared beneath her feet. But don't tell Mum, Sara pleaded. She's already going through so much. In the morning, Cassandra woke up and didn't find Robert next to her. Oh, Joe. She found him in the living room, sitting with a photo album in his hands, looking at old photographs. His gaze lingered especially on a picture where the three of them were together, young, happy, not yet knowing how their destinies would intertwine. Cassandra, do you remember this day? He asked softly, showing her the yellowed photo. In it, he and Sara were sitting on a park bench, and Robert was behind them with his hands on both sisters' shoulders. How could I not remember? Cassandra replied, sitting down next to him. It was the only time you took us on the swings. I even unbraided my hair. I wanted to show off, but the wind messed it all up. They were silent, turning the pages of the past. Behind each photo was a story, a pain, a joy. So many years have passed, and it feels like it was yesterday, Robert sighed. Old age is like a fast-flowing river. You barely notice, and life is already behind you. At that moment, the phone rang. It was Chloe. Mum, her voice sounded worried. Aunt Sara is seriously ill. Cassandra squeezed the phone tightly. What does she have? Cancer, pancreatic cancer. She came to say goodbye. Cassandra's chest tightened. For years she had held a grudge against her sister, but now that resentment seemed so small, so insignificant, in the face of a true tragedy. Bring her here, she said firmly. She'll stay with us. Robert, hearing the change in his wife's voice, looked at her with curiosity. Sara is sick. Cancer, Cassandra said. The husband's face tightened. Pain appeared in his eyes. Let her come, he nodded. There's plenty of room. An hour later, Chloe brought Sara. When Cassandra saw her sister at the door, she could barely hold back her tears. Sara seemed to have aged in a single day, painfully pale, with a haggard face, as if everything she had tried to hide for years had suddenly come to light. "Come in, sister," Cassandra said, hugging her. "Now everything will be different." Sara entered the room and sank into a chair. Robert stood in the doorway, not knowing what to do. "Don't stand there like a post, Robert," Cassandra said with unexpected firmness. "Bring us some tea. Sara and I need to talk." When Robert went to the kitchen, the sisters were left alone. For the first time in many years, they were alone. "Why didn't you say anything from the beginning?" Cassandra asked. "Why did you come and keep silent about your illness?" Sara looked at her for a long time. "I was afraid you wouldn't accept me, that you would say, to me, you're the home wrecker." "You're silly," Cassandra sighed. "We're so old and we're still acting like children." "Forgive me, Cassandra," Sara said suddenly. Her voice trembled. "Forgive me for everything, for Robert, for our broken youth, for not going to Mom's funeral." Cassandra took her sister's hand in her palms, thin with prominent veins. "I forgave you a long time ago," she replied softly. "Your life wasn't easy. No husband, no children. You paid a high price." Sara cried silently, like old people cry, those who have almost lived through everything. Cassandra stroked her hair, which was beginning to grey. "Cry, little sister, you'll feel better." That evening, when dinner was ready, Cassandra made up the sofa in the living room for Sara. Robert silently brought pillows and a blanket. When Cassandra and Robert were alone in the bedroom, she said, "The three of us need to talk. Tomorrow it's time to say aloud what we have been silent about for 50 years. Robert nodded. "You're right. No more secrets." The next day, when Chloe took the children, leaving the parents and aunt alone, the conversation took place. For the first time in half a century, the three of them sat together at the table. They were no longer young lovers, confused by their feelings, but old people who had walked a long path filled with mistakes, pain, and yet love. Robert looked at both women. He spoke calmly, but his eyes were moist. "I have to say, I loved you both. In different ways, but I loved you. You, Cassandra, with a quiet and secure love. You, Sara, with passion and without reservations. I was confused then. I was young and foolish, and then I chose what seemed right. And did you regret it?" Sara asked, looking him directly in the eyes. Robert was silent for a long moment, then he looked up. "No, Cassandra was a good wife to me. She gave me a family, children, a home. Our life was difficult, but it was ours. That's more than a youthful passion, that's real." Sara lowered her head. "I loved you too, Robert. I never married anyone. I always thought, what if you come back?" "Forgive me," Robert said softly. "I should have been stronger, more decisive back then, not let my parents break me. But I was afraid." "You're a fool, Robert," Cassandra said suddenly with unexpected warmth. "You have nothing to forgive. You were a good husband, a good father. And if your heart had another place, everyone has their secret corners in their soul." Three elderly people sat at the table, and time seemed to have stopped for them. All the unspoken words, the omissions that had poisoned their lives for so many years, were finally coming to light, and it was easier to breathe. Sara stayed to live with her sister and brother-in-law. A new life full of new worries began. Cassandra, who had taken care of her family all her life, now took care of her sick sister with the same dedication. She got up earlier than usual. She prepared herbal infusions with her grandmother's recipes, the same ones that had been passed down from generation to generation. St. John's wort for sadness, sage for strength, chamomile for calm. New jars with herbs and boxes of medicine appeared in the small kitchen. Cassandra cooked light soups that Sara could eat even on bad days when nausea wouldn't leave her alone. She finely grated carrots and apples and made fresh juices. "Drink, little sister," she would say, placing another cup of infusion in front of Sara. "You need your strength." Sara drank obediently, frowning at the bitterness but not complaining. Robert also changed. He suddenly became more attentive to Cassandra, offering his help before she even had to ask. He didn't do it out of obligation, but from a heartfelt impulse. It seemed that he had once again seen her not only as the mother of his children and the lady of the house, but as a woman with a big heart. A woman who had forgiven so much to both him and her sister. In the evenings, the three of them would sit in the small kitchen, drink tea, and remember the past. Not the painful one that happened at the crossroads of their destinies, but the early, shared, and warm one. Childhood in the mining town, school mischief, the first dances at the club. "Remember when we stole cherries from Aunt's tree? She hit us with nettles," Sara laughed, and her haggard face seemed to get younger for a moment. "How could I not?" Cassandra replied. "I had welts on my legs that lasted a week." Robert watched in surprise as two elderly women, who until recently were almost strangers, became close sisters again, as if those 50 years of grudges, silences, and jealousy had never existed. Chloe came almost every day with the twins. The girls, at first shy with the unknown aunt, little by little got used to Sara, brought her books, and told her about their college affairs. Despite her weakness, Sara always found the strength to listen and give advice. One night, when the house had quieted down, Sara called her sister into the room. Cassandra entered and saw Sara sitting on the edge of the bed, holding a small wooden box. "Sit down," Sara said, patting the spot next to her. She took out a small box covered in faded velvet. "Take it, little sister. This is yours by right," she said, handing the box to Cassandra. Cassandra opened it and gasped. Inside were amber earrings, the very same ones that had once been the apple of discord between the sisters when their parents gave them to Sara and not her. They were simple, but incredibly beautiful. Transparent golden amber in a silver setting. "They were always yours," Sara said in a low voice. "I just kept them for you all these years." Cassandra couldn't hold back her tears. She hugged her sister, so thin that her bones could be clearly felt under her blouse. A month passed. Sara felt a little better. The new medications helped, and the home care had an effect. She was even able to go out into the yard a few times, sit on the bench, and let the autumn sun touch her face. But it was time to go. An exam at the oncology centre and scheduled treatments were waiting for her. "I'll come to see you as soon as you get settled," Cassandra said, helping her sister pack. "I'll help you with the paperwork for the treatment," Sara nodded. "Come, there's plenty of room. My apartment is small but cosy, and it's near the sea. You can walk along the boardwalk and regain your strength." To Cassandra's surprise, Robert offered to take Sara to the bus station. "It'll be a quick trip, there and back," he said, and helped Sara with her things. When he came home, he was holding a modest bouquet of wildflowers in his hands. Daisies, cornflowers, bluebells, the same ones he used to give Cassandra in their youth. "This is for you," he said shyly, offering the bouquet to his wife. "It's been a long time since I gave you flowers." Cassandra accepted the bouquet and put it in a vase. "Thank you, Robert. They're beautiful." That evening, they sat on the balcony watching the sunset. Robert took his wife's hand, not out of habit, but with desire. "You know, Cassandra," he said thoughtfully, "my whole life I thought I lost something important when I chose you instead of Sara, but now I understand that I gained so much more than I lost." Cassandra smiled softly. "Don't open old wounds, Robert. We've lived a good life, different, difficult, but it was ours." "And you don't regret it?" Robert asked suddenly, "living with someone who couldn't love you with all his heart?" Cassandra looked at the setting sun for a long time. "No, Robert, I don't regret it. Everyone loves as they can. Maybe true love isn't in passion, but in everyday life, side by side." Robert squeezed her hand tighter. "You are wise, Cassandra. You were always wiser than I was." A month later, they prepared to visit Sara. Cassandra was worried about how her sister was doing and how she had handled the exams. Their phone calls were brief. Sara didn't like to complain. The sea greeted them with a gentle breeze. Sara was waiting on the platform, haggard, but with an inner light in her eyes. "The doctors say there's hope," she said, hugging her sister. "It's a new experimental method. We'll try it." They lived for 2 weeks in the small apartment with a sea view. Cassandra cooked. Robert fixed the dripping faucet and the wobbly chairs. Sara took them to the boardwalk, showing them her favourite spots. Once, sitting on a bench right by the sea, the three elderly people, two sisters and the man who united their destinies, suddenly laughed at the same time. "My God," Sara said, wiping away tears of laughter. "How ridiculous we were in our youth. All that drama, passions and grudges, and now here we are, three old people, and it all seems so small and insignificant." "Don't say that," Cassandra nodded. "Life passed by, and only now could we talk properly." "But we did it in time," Robert said softly, watching the waves roll in. How many people die without saying the most important things to their loved ones? They sat in silence, listening to the murmur of the waves, watching the sea shimmer in the rays of the setting sun. Three people united by a common past and present, reconciled with destiny and with each other.